Hey there knitters, I'm Jana with Purl Together. We are about to start the Cozy Winter Shawl knit along. But before we do, there's a couple of things I want to point out about the pattern. I want to tell you about a specific modification that I intend to make that is optional certainly for you. You can take it or leave it. And just some thoughts about swatching and gauge and things you'll want to keep in mind as you're working through the pattern. So this is a paid for pattern. So what that means for our purposes is that first of all, I'd encourage you to buy the pattern, and the link is down below in the video description. And secondly, I will not be walking you through it line by line as we have with some other knit-alongs we've done. Rather, out of respect for the designer, you need to go and buy the pattern. If you have questions, we'll talk about them in the Ravelry group, but I won't be walking you through it line by line where you could actually knit the pattern off the video without actually purchasing it. That wouldn't be very cool, and it might also in fact be a violation of copyright. So go get your copy. It's on sale. The designer Melanie has generously offered us a 15% discount code until May 20th. So go check for that. The code is Purl Together, all lowercase and mashed together. The pattern calls for about 550 yards of Aran, or a little bit heavier than worsted weight. I am using Malabrigo Rios, which is a straight up worsted weight, and I have a few more stitches per inch than the gauge indicated on the pattern. So what that means for me is that I'm gonna there's several options. One, I might just go ahead and knit it as written and have a little bit smaller shawl than the finished dimensions indicate in the pattern. I don't necessarily want to have a smaller shawl. So probably I'm going to do a chart repeat at the very end. There were some comments on the pattern about, somebody inquired about how could you make the shawl larger if you wanted, and Melanie responded in that and said that you could simply repeat chart C if you wanted to make a larger shawl. So that's likely what I will do, rather than sizing up needles, because I like the density of the fabric and the way my cables look with the size 10. So that's where swatching comes in. If you get started and you don't really care for how the fabric is it too loose, is it too tight, whatever, you can either choose to add a repeat of chart C like I will. You can buy more yarn. You'll need to do that, obviously. Or you can choose to use different yarn or a different needle combination in order to get the gauge indicated on the pattern, which works out to about 3.5 stitches per inch, or 14 stitches over a 4-inch block. And that is after blocking. So if you want to be super technical about it, knit a swatch, knit back and forth, knitting and purling, because our pattern is knitted back and forth, and then block it to C. Now, I've said before that I don't really feel that gauge is super critical with a shawl, because it's a shawl. It doesn't have to fit you in the same way that a sweater does or a sock. However, I'm going to make sure that I'm probably going to do that extra repeat. I don't want to have a smaller shawl. The one that I'm making is for a fundraiser, so I want it to be a good size, right? I don't necessarily want it to just be worn as a scarf. I want it to be big enough to like wrap around a person. So there was a conversation in the Ravelry group, and yes, I have said in the past that gauge isn't not super critical. And again, it isn't, but I want this, for my purposes, for this particular project, I want it to be big enough. So either size up your needles and get the correct stitches per inch, use bigger yarn, use bigger needles. If you're using worsted weight that seems a little thin, you could hold it double and then size up your needles. So those are some options for what you can do to get gauge if you're not getting it currently. Okay. So the other fun thing that I'm going to add, if you look at the pictures on the pattern, you'll notice there's an Icord Bind Off, and an Icord is just kind of that cord that's a little thicker that goes along the bottom of the shawl, which is really the side. It's one of the sides of the triangle. That's the bind off edge. I really like how that looks, so I'm choosing to add Icord Edging as I go. As I go back and forth across and knit the shawl, I'm adding 6 stitches, 3 on each side. That will be an Icord edge, and I will show you specifically how to do that. But that also means I'm going to need more yarn, right? Because I'm adding 6 more stitches every row. So I have Well, I bought extra. When I bought my Malabrigo, I ordered 6 skeins because I knew I'd want to have some other on hand for a different project. So you might consider picking up an extra skein, at least if you want to either make a bigger shawl and or add the Icord edging that I will show you. Now that's totally optional. If you want to knit it as written, absolutely do that. I'm just going to show you what I'm preferring to do in the knit along, and you can take it or leave it because you're the boss. Okay. I will clarify how we're going to do that as we cast on and get started. And really, it's really pretty straightforward. I would call this an adventurous intermediate pattern. The only reason that it's a little bit adventurous is just because there's several things going on at once. And so it does require you to pay attention. It's not necessarily Netflix knitting if you don't have that experience. It does require paying attention, or else you will make mistakes and then you end up tinking or tearing back. And that's never fun. And that can be discouraging. But it's also part of learning, okay? Let me check my notes, make sure. I think that's about it. So just a quick little intro. Print your pattern. Don't forget your coupon code. As always, let me know in the groups if you have any questions. And I'll see you for cast on Tuesday the 21st.